to Jewish Women Talk About Midlife. Hi, I'm Devora Krasnianski, and I've been coaching women for a long time in all areas of life, including women in midlife. Midlife is an exciting time, but it's also sometimes confusing, and so I invite experts to join me here as we unpack this crazy and interesting time of our lives. You can join our conversations on our Facebook group, Jewish Women Talk About Midlife. And in this episode, I spoke with Shaina Keren, a career coach, about how we can reinvent our work life in midlife. Whether it's coming back into the workforce or wanting a change, there are so many options. At this point in our lives, we have years of experience and wisdom we can bring into our work. In this conversation, we discussed some ways to figure out what's next. We also spoke about starting a business versus taking on a new job or new responsibilities at a current job. So if you're thinking about what's next for your work life, this is an important episode for you. Enjoy. Hi, I'm Devora Krasnianski with Jewish Women Talk About Midlife. And today I have a very important topic. As I talk to women about midlife and other topics, a lot of times I get questions, what should I do next? I love my job, or some people, I didn't like my job, and I want to do something else. And so that's why I brought you, Shaina Keren, to talk about this, because this is what you do. So tell us a little bit more about what it is that you are doing in this space of helping people find their next job, work, whatever it is in general, and then we'll talk about midlife specifically.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I love what you're doing here. It's such a specific niche that I don't think anyone else has really been targeting specifically in the way that you are. So sure. In general, I work with people who are trying to make a life decision, whether it's their first job ever, first career ever. Much more often, though, it's people who have started doing something, and a lot of people just had an opportunity, fell into something, got their first job, found their way into an industry, sometimes because it was the popular thing to do at the time. Sometimes it was a family business, and then they find themselves 5, 10, 20 years later, and they're ready to think about, what would I really love to do? Now, maybe it worked for them at the time in the beginning, and now it's not working anymore, and they've been having that feeling build up for a while. Or maybe it was something that they never liked. There's all kinds of scenarios, and my focus is always helping them figure out, going back into who are you, what are your ideal strengths, what are you naturally good at, how are you wired, what are your values, what are your current goals, and then coming up with something like, whatever it is, anything, and then helping them get there, whether it's coming up with a business plan, writing a resume, figuring out how to network their way into a new position. So it's like from confusion to hopefully career happiness is the process that I work to lead people through.
Right. So that's why I'm so glad we're talking, because some people in midlife love their jobs, and they may be listening just because they're curious, but I'm talking about those who want to figure out something else. And it's not only jobs, sometimes like it's a family business, or it was their business that they started and it's not working for whatever reasons. So when you work with people in midlife, what are you seeing? What are their reasons that they want to have this change?
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, there's so many reasons. Family business is a very touchy one and a very common one, because I've seen this happen a lot midlife, especially with women. There's sometimes, I mean, not sometimes, often, but somehow just expected to step in when their parents had a business, their spouse has a business. And I don't know if this is the experience of people who are listening, but I find that it happens sometimes because they feel like, oh, they were given an opportunity sort of as a favor. Oh, we want to make it work for you. We want something flexible while you're in school, or maybe while you have young children at home. And then they often turn around and they're just like, I'm underpaid, but there's no one to negotiate with because the boss is your husband or your dad. And it's like, oh, you need more money? Like, what do you need? I'll take care of it. And it becomes very hard to separate your work and your paycheck from your personal life and your value. And there are a lot of lines that get blurred. And moving up in a career like that, so that's one challenge. And then there are other reasons why a person would want to change. Often I find it's either money or it's meaning. And it's usually an extreme of either one. Sometimes people have made plenty of money and now they're looking for meaning, or the opposite. They've had this meaningful career. Maybe they were a teacher or something that they were, young and idealistic and went into, and now they're making weddings and up to a stage of life where they simply can't figure it out anymore, and they need their job to be able to, give them more financially. and they have the time to do it, and it just becomes frustrating. Like, I have time, I have talent, and I just see my kids going out there and getting careers. That's often like a big instigator. I'm making money, and I just feel like I'm being, left behind, and I have so many more years ahead of me, but I don't know where to go and how to start, because the world is changing so fast, and careers are changing, and jobs are being created and disappearing at such fabulous rates that it's hard to keep up.
And the jobs that when we were starting out, by midlife, we are 25, 30 years into working or coming back into the workforce. But the jobs that were popular 20 years ago, 25 years ago, some of them are even obsolete. And so you can't go back to what we knew. And now with technology is changing so quickly that there's so many different options, and you don't know what really is going to last. If you're not really in it, you don't really know what's going to last, what's going to be meaningful. You don't really know people who are doing certain things. And so I find that talking to somebody who knows the different options is going to be so powerful.
It's interesting because, people often think that they're coming to speak to a career consultant for information. And there's plenty of information that I help people with. Just knowing what the job market is, knowing how much to ask for salary, understanding the certificates, the training, the background, the expectations that people have in an interview. There's a certain amount of information, but we do live in the information age. So anything that people know, you can find online, right? Everyone could be a researcher. I do find that what people really are missing more is the confidence. And it's like, people around you, they know you, and you're supposed to stay the same. It's very comfortable for people. You're the teacher in their minds. And if you're going to change that, it's like, it's weird for them, right? Like suddenly you think you're going to be a big executive. Like, you're just my sister, the teacher. Like, who do you think you are? And we keep that in mind, like, a lot. Whatever I'm going to tell people, more than we realize, the subconscious, sort of defines us. Like, roles are really comfortable. And a lot of times it's just the confidence and like, an outsider looking at a person, and a good friend can do this for you too, if they're able to look at you objectively and just like, no, these are all the things that you can do. You have those talents. It's interesting. I come from I was thinking about this, preparing for this conversation, because I'm thinking, well, I don't know if I qualify for midlife. I'm in my 30s, and I've always worked. I think that my generation, when I was, like about 15 years ago, getting started, there were less options than there are now. And I've definitely reinvented my career. But I always look at it that it was a blessing that I was from the generation where it was it was an absolute that I was going to go get a degree and get a job and work my way through. And I see people who took a break as having a harder time, not because they have any less skills or talent, but because they have less confidence, because they just feel like they don't know the lingo. And it's not so hard to get back into. It's really just looking at yourself from the work perspective, and suddenly you find, like, it's not like people know so much, or it's so complicated or fancy, but it's like speaking a little bit of a different language, which you pick up on once you like going into any culture. But when I look back at people, my family. So, my first thought was, well, I watched my mother go through this. She was a Balshuva when she was 18. She graduated high school, wasn't going to go to college, went off backpacking to Israel, found her way to Neve and got married and raised a family like you would do when you were in the 80s, and got married and became from. Like, that's what you were going to do. It was a choice between career or from, and you didn't really have the option to have both for people who are coming from one lifestyle and sort of switching over like that. And so when I was, I grew up having a mother at home, but then once all the kids were in school, and we had a large family, she went back to school. And from age like 43 to 50, I watched her balance and make weddings and be in school and juggle it back and forth, semester after semester, course after course. And she actually pivoted a few times. She went to school first for one thing. Halfway through, she realized it wasn't what she wanted. And then, so I watched her navigate that. And I think I didn't realize at the time, but it was really giving me insight onto the struggle that people go through. And then when she was 50, she graduated and she became a social worker. And I always tell people about that. And I use it as such an example because so many people think when they're like 38, like I'm too old, or they're 48 and they're too old. And it's like, when she knew that she's going to have another 15, 20 years, and even if it's only going to be another 10 years of working, why shouldn't those be happy years of doing something that you enjoy. And, to me, so I grew up with that, and it was like a very natural thing for me to see. And I guess I sort of have that expectation, like, oh, well, you could raise your family, but then like you've got like a whole nother lifetime ahead of you to go and do something else.
We are living longer, and we have so much energy. We're taking better care of ourselves, and we have so much energy, and we have so much wisdom at midlife. It's just a matter of channeling it into something. And sometimes having a conversation with somebody else, like you said, a little bit more objective, could really help you see options that you didn't see. Like, yes, of course, there's tons of information online, but I think having that conversation with someone who can help you navigate. I mean, there's so much information online and so many options, and then there's so many options that are in our world, but there's even more options outside that are not the typical. I know someone who wants to be a horse trainer, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's not a typical job, but she loves it. She's really contemplating it. I don't know that she's going to want to do it, but that's something that she really wants to do. The money's good, the flexibility is good.
Right. And then I wonder if, like, in her case, it's like, what are people going to think? Or maybe she's past that and she doesn't, it doesn't matter. But then it's interesting because when you look, you start Googling midlife careers, right? So the things that come up, I find, are really not maybe the best advice, or don't fit the same challenges that the Jewish mother is experiencing, because a lot of people in that stage of life, they're assuming that you had 25 years of a solid career behind you, and now you're just trying to make a change. So that becomes pretty obvious. But from, and your kids are moving out and they're going to college, and maybe you need less income and you get to like explore yourself. And I think that from women are often making weddings and maybe helping their married children and have the responsibilities of taking good care of their parents, and responsibilities. They might have more time during the day, but the responsibilities and the financial pressure often goes up. And then there's that feeling of stuck. I don't have time to go to school. I don't have time to go learn something new. I've done this one thing for the last 25 years. And like, how am I supposed to make a change? Is that something that you see a lot?
So I'm seeing that a lot. I'm also seeing, like you started saying, about the roles and the expectations of people in their inner circle. Like, people are not, for some women, their spouses, their husbands are not encouraging them to go do something different.
I mean, a spouse in any stage of life is probably the worst person to go to for career advice. I mean, my own husband, right? Like, people would think that I'm going to encourage him to have a career, but I'm like, no, you keep your paycheck, because I want to go build this business. So just, and if he wanted to start a business, that would be hard for me. Like, I'm going to be the least supportive person, because I'm thinking about myself. I'm so biased. I'm going to give the worst advice. And I think that goes for most people. Your spouse wants to know that you're going to be home, that you're going to be available when they want to go on vacation, that you're going to be there, providing whatever it is that they're used to you providing over the years. And you making a change is, like, I think, pretty impossible for them to really give objective advice. And so, of course, you want them to be on board with your decision, but don't expect them to be the one really, being your cheerleader. I mean, if that happens, lucky you. But if you wait for them to say, it's time for you to go discover yourself, go for it, don't worry about the rest of us, that's pretty unlikely to happen.
And it's not only about the money. It's sometimes even the kids. Like, don't change the role. Don't change it. They're not gonna be able to know how to navigate the new change. Like if the mother was home or made dinner often, now she's going to go to school 2 nights a week, and then dinner is going to have to be warmed up by somebody who's at home.
Imagine the horror.
Or it may actually be some kind of their own salad. But that's
Imagine, right? Take something out of the freezer all by yourself, where there's still breakfast for dinner. But I think that it's really important, and this goes for every part of life, deciding if you're going to send your baby to daycare, and get a job, or stay home and everything. And I think, as a daughter, as a mother, it's really important when I see a young mother staying home and quitting her job to be home with her child, and then miserable because of it. I just think, like, you think you're giving your child the best because, they're home and they're maybe not in a germy, place with other kids, and you're giving them, the ability to explore and be in nature and whatever, but you're miserable. Like, do you think that the way that their brain is developing, and the way that whatever it is that they're getting, and the vibes and the emotional that they're getting from you, like, maybe their day to day is better, right? Or whatever, whatever you're comparing to, but like overall, if you're going to be this grouchy, a person who feels like resentment, whether it's conscious or subconscious, that, you missed out on life, like that's not going to give them their best life. And it's like sacrificing is never a good idea. There's like the balance between being like the Jewish mother who, puts her kids first, but then like, I think putting your kids first is taking care of yourself and being a role model of, when they grow up. Like I always think, say, this evening we're sitting here and, I did bedtime, but it was a quick bedtime. And I asked my daughter, I told her, what I'm speaking about tonight, and, asked her if she has any advice. And I told her about it. And I think that her knowing that, I'm going to do something that I care about, that's meaningful, that I have a life. I think that maybe now she wishes I would have snuggled with her for longer. But I think that I think it's important for her to know that, she had this as a role model, and she can think about herself as a person and be able to go after things that, like are important to her, and develop herself and realize that her mother's the person.
And also to add to that is like when the kids are a little bit older and they are older teenagers and are married, they want their mother and their father to have a life. Otherwise, some people, what I'm finding also, is that they become a little bit too enmeshed with their adult children's lives because they have so much time. So
right.
they should be doing something that's meaningful. It doesn't necessarily have to be paid meaningful, but it should be something that's engaging and interesting to them. Arthur Brooks' book, From Strength to Strength, talks about, like you said before, someone who had 25 years of good work and now wants to do something else. He's saying, give back to the community.
Right.
And for some people who have the money, and that's wonderful, but and they can, downsize their paycheck. But the idea of doing something meaningful so that they're busy and not just around. And for some families, it's become, like what I'm seeing also on the midlife side, is that some parents who are not working are becoming a little bit too enmeshed, and it's something else to consider.
That's interesting. It's very interesting. I noticed Dina Friedman's new class, Generations in Harmony, and I had that thought of like, oh wow, okay, so she's, really like, this must be a big enough topic that there's a course on it now. And I wonder if that's like a part of what causes that. Not up to that stage of life, but I think that parents, like you don't want your kids to ever feel like responsible for you in that way. And I mean, would a child rather their mother always be available to babysit, but then like feel that sense of obligation, that their whole life and they have nothing else than friends and outside interests and hobbies? And I think that's too heavy a responsibility for an adult child to have to bear.
Right. I mean, yes, on the one hand, they may not have their mother to babysit or to come for a week just because they can, but also it depends what work you end up doing. Sometimes you could take your work with you, and that's something that we can talk about some people at midlife do want that flexibility, and that's why they're leaving what they were doing. Like someone just today, as I welcome every new member to Jewish Women Talk About Midlife, and some people actually respond. And someone was saying that she just moved to Israel and she speaks the language, but she needs a flexible job because she has her aging parents. And she has her children and her grandchildren that she wants to be able to visit, but she wants to do something meaningful. And what can she do? And I said, listen to this conversation, but really, what can she do? And there is that responsibility. For some people, it's the aging parent and the sandwich generation. So there is the idea of the need for flexibility. And sometimes some of it you could actually pay for somebody else to babysit, if that's what, like if you have a conference, if you have a flexibility, you set it up to be flexible, but then sometimes even when you set it to be flexible, you can't be flexible. If you have a conference or a trade show, like most of the time you're flexible, but not now.
Right,
so you can contribute in other ways.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I would much rather someone send me a baby nurse than have, than maybe hosting a family member and feeling like taking away from their own time. But I guess it depends on each person. I think it's important for women to also, there are the women who really just live for spending time with their family and the grandchildren and love hosting, and that's great. But I think it's when people who maybe are more intellectual and do get their satisfaction other places, not to feel like they have to fit into that stereotype, and like, if that's not for you, that's not for you, and to think about it. Really, just it should be a personal choice. If that's what you love, then great. I'm sure there's a great way to balance it. I want to answer some of the questions.
Right, so some questions came in. So let's talk to those.
Okay.
Okay. So somebody wrote to me, I had a part-time job, but I have more hours to devote to working, making money. How do I determine what to do?
Okay. So I guess the question always is, if someone had a part-time job, so the question is that something that you liked? And is it something that you did because it was like a job, right? Which, stands for like just over broke, right? It wasn't like something that I chose to do. It was something to pay the bills, and I really couldn't care less about it. Went home, didn't think about it, and, and that's it. Or was it something that you enjoyed, and now, you want to take on more hours? You could translate it into something further in that field. So I would really advise taking the time. I mean, this is, I think general wisdom, but to take the time to stop to think about it. Like, just because you did that for the last 20 years, do you like it? Do you want to continue doing it? Like, you have a choice now. You don't have to, continue doing this anymore. That's the first thing. And then by choosing what to do, again, you're getting to choose. Like, sometimes it's just, taking on more hours, or maybe you could go in your field. A lot of times people are limited and stay in certain workplaces where things aren't perfect, but it was convenient. Lots of people will keep a job because of the location, or lack of commute, or, because they get Fridays off, or because they get to, run to the, kids' school doctor, even though everything else wasn't perfect. So like, that's one of the first thing I would consider, like, why do you really have this job? And then step back and, if you want to reassess completely and choose something new, or just figure out the parts of it that you did like, and see, where else we could use it. It's a little bit of a general question. I hope that sort of answers it.
Right. So let's say somebody was working in an organization, so she loved the mission, and doing a lot of the receptionist work.
Oh, okay.
Let's use that as an example. She loves the mission, but it's not paying enough, and now she has more hours.
So I love that. Yeah. So my first question is always to find a way to go to your employer and let them know that you're looking to increase your earning and to offer more value. Because so many people go out and start looking for a new job, and if they would have only had that conversation, because what happens is that you think, oh no, I know there's no money here, I know there's nowhere to move up, and you just make that assumption, and then you go out, spend so much time on your resume, on getting interviews, on coming late and leaving work early and making yourself crazy to go to those interviews, and finally getting a job offer. And then you come back to the boss and you say, I found something else, I want to give them my notice. And they say, what? We want you. Tell me what you need. We'll make it work. And it's like, what? Like, I didn't even know we could have this conversation. So what if you could go and have that conversation before you spent all that time and energy? Now, people are afraid to have this conversation because then they're afraid that they're going to be replaced before they're ready. If I let them know that I'm thinking and that I'm looking for more, then they might think that I'm leaving. And then what if I get, fired or let go before I'm ready? So there's a way to have the conversation without putting a threat or putting yourself in that position. And it's really just about how you word it and say, I have some more time. I'm wondering what the potential is here. I would love to do more. I've always done, the receptionist job, but, I have been thinking about taking on more. I don't know if, whether the fundraising or thinking about going in and asking about specific projects. And usually you can find a way to show that you've helped with that, right? Like, even though you weren't the fundraiser, I'm sure donor relationships is something that you did as a secretary. And I'm sure you were involved in either the design or some of the project management of campaigns and or whatever it would be in providing different resources. And most likely there's something that you've gotten really good at that you are just doing by the way as part of your job that no one's giving you credit for or paying you for. And to come with a suggestion, if you know that there's a need, you're the one who knows best, right? If you're the receptionist, you really know more than anybody in the business. And you have the opportunity to say, I was thinking of taking a training. Do you think that there would be a need for me to do that? And then there's a way to have the conversation. So I always advise having that without threatening to leave. Don't make any mention of leaving, but I have more time on my hands. My kids are out of the house. I used to be able, I appreciate you making it work for me all these years. I really can stay on more. I can travel now. I can, have some time to invest. Like that's always step one. And then, after that, if it's not possible and you did love your job, but it's just not making enough money, I would spend the time thinking about when I ask people this question, what is something that what's a moment or something that happened over at any point in your career? It could have had nothing to do with your actual job description that you remember as being like a moment of joy. And it might be, when you were like something that really had nothing to do with your job, but a conversation or advice that maybe you gave to another employee. And like from that is a really good place to see, what's the times when you just naturally, like doing this. Like it reminds me of I had this experience back when I was doing special education. I was working part-time doing special education and part-time in the agency office because there weren't enough cases and I wanted more work. And they said, you can do, service coordination. And I was in the office one day and someone, just looked up from her desk and said, oh, my friend needs help with the resume. She just sent it to me. Does anyone here, know how to do a resume? And I like jumped at the chance. I was like, oh, I love helping with resumes. And I was just like always the person who my family and friends came to. And she was like, how much do you charge? And I was like, what? Like, no, like I'm happy to do it. And she's like, no, she's looking for a resume writer. Like, let me just send it to her. Like, and I spent like an hour after work working on the stranger's resume. And I had so much fun doing it. Out of the whole job, that's one of the moments of joy that I remember. I had nothing to do with the job. So, and then I actually ended up turning that into, becoming a resumator, and that led me into doing what I do today. So I think that's like one good way of thinking about what it is that you like doing. And then seeing if you can go do that in another organization, how much you can get paid, doing your research, and so on.
So similarly, if there's a part of the job that wasn't even the part of the job that happened to be in the same office, which I think is great. Like I love the hashgacha of that all. Mm-hmm. But many times, like if you're working with a funder and they want to planning the whole event, and then you can just turn that into an event planning or something.
Exactly. I mean, I think women really undermine themselves. When I sit down with someone, and often we sit down and go through their job when we're having a conversation, when they want to prepare for like a salary review. So we go through what they actually do. And statistically, men are more likely to take credit for things that they didn't do, and women are less likely to take credit for things that they did. And when someone, it's so easy for a woman even if she feels like maybe she gets credit, sometimes you're working for someone who unfortunately is very careful and stingy with the praise that they give you, because then you might realize how valuable you are. And I've had this happen to a number of people. And, when that happens, and slightly off topic to the question, but, I've had them go back and ask for, more. Sometimes they get it and say like, and it's really getting the confidence to say, I'm the executive assistant, but I actually, pulled off that dinner for 400 people where we brought in at $1.5 million. I'm so happy to be able to help with that. But generally fundraisers get paid a percentage, or, asking and people are afraid and uncomfortable to ask. And it doesn't mean that you're greedy. It means that you're putting in the value. And if you're feeling resentful, that means you're not getting back the value and you're not going to be able to give as much. It's just the way the world works. And then other times, I've had the same scenario where they open their eyes and they said, you know what, they don't care. Like they just think I should be able to do it because, it really works well for them if I do the work and they make the money. So then they'll go out and get a job offer. And I've had people double and triple their salaries just from other people who were maybe clients or knew what this person was capable of. And from the outside in was able to say like, oh, you're available for a job. Like I'll pay you whatever you want, and be able to appreciate them. But it starts with appreciating yourself. That's the only way other people are going to appreciate you.
Right. And especially if you were not appreciated from externally, sometimes you think maybe I'm not really doing much. And I think that's important to really even go through a week and see how much you've done, and then think of the highlights of what you've done. I think there's so much. That's why also when I talk to people is like, what have you done this week that you enjoy doing? What have you done this week that you should have, or you would have liked to have gotten some appreciation for?
I recommend to people to keep a career journal, or call it what you wish. It can be a Google Doc, it could be on your notes on your phone, it can be an actual notebook that you keep. But once a week, sit down and write down what is something that I accomplished. Because when you're sitting down for that review, it's very easy for people to make you feel like you didn't do anything. But if you're able to put together this list, And that's assuming that you have a review. I know lots of places are not so structured or official, but at least you'll know. Or even if you don't feel like there's time to tell to your current employer, when you go on an interview, you'll have a list of things that you did, because at the end of the year, I mean, who remembers, even as a mother, right? No one remembers every meal you made and every carpool you ran and every time you stayed up late to, wash somebody's white shirt for the next morning, but if you're keeping a little record, it might seem silly, but I've had people who do it who tell me that it really helped them significantly financially and just in self-valuing. And whereas, the employer was able to, was like, oh, wow, that's really a lot. Like, that's really cool that you did. And you don't have to show them that you're writing it down. But when you come in prepared, and you say, well, a couple of things, I wanted to share a couple of things that I worked on and things that I'm, hoping to accomplish in the coming year. And just speaking about yourself, and maybe even suggesting that your title should change, because titles are important, because you get paid for your title.
Well, in some places I know just give a title as the promotion, just the title, and think that it
right. That's no. If you're getting fooled by a title, then no, don't let that happen.
Well, it looks good on the resume for the next job, but that's about it if you're not getting any more money for it.
That's like saying, can you take this client because it will be good for your portfolio? That doesn't pay bills. Absolutely not. No, not a fan.
Right. But I also think that as you're writing it, if you do it every week, or right now no one writes it, but as you type it every week, it's building your confidence. Look, I am really a valuable employee. I really do interesting things. So every week, it's only when you read it back right before the review.
It's mostly for yourself. 100%. Yeah.
So another question. Okay. We want to talk about ageism?
That's good. We can talk about that. What's the question?
Is ageism a real thing? Does that mean that I'm shut out of certain types of work? Is there a way for me to get into a field that I love, but mostly hires younger people?
Okay, excellent question. So I think ageism is real, but like any other ism, it's partially up to you and partially not. So let's focus on the part that's in your control. But what I mean about the part that's not in your control, I have had people reach out to me, and often employees will reach out to me and say, hey, lots of talented people, they come and speak to you about their career. They know by the time, we're finished working together, they're very sure and confident in what they're going to do. Do you know anyone? So I've at times been in a place where I can match people up and suggested clients of mine for jobs, and I sometimes get to hear back, and they'll give me the honest feedback, even if they won't give it to the candidate. And I've had really young employers say she was just too old. It was the wrong vibe for the place. But I've also had really young employers tell me, we're looking for someone senior. We need someone who's a mother, who has that presence, who, and they realize that as long as they're not intimidated by the person themselves. So, that's where it's going to be a thing. Now, I think let's take it, it's a thing, but mostly I think that the biggest reason it becomes a problem is when people feel like it's a problem, and not, there is discrimination that exists, but it exists more times than it needs to, because people are afraid of it. So, you can have the same 60-year-old walking into an interview, feeling like I'm old and feeling insecure about it, just the same way you can have a 20-year-old walking into an interview and feeling like I'm too young and feeling insecure about it. So it's like, if you're going to say, oh, I'm probably be your grandmother, oh, I know your mother-in-law, she's so great. Like, making comments that put you in an older category will make people think of a person as older, and showing that you're, like, if you think about yourself, that my talents and my skills and my experience, I'm happy to leverage them. And also, one of the fears that lots of younger employers have is that I'm going to teach someone everything I know, and then they're going to go steal my business. And I think one great thing about an older person is that coming in as an employee at an older age, not that they can't start a business, but they've had the time to think about if they wanted to do that. And they're very likely comfortable being an employee, and you don't have to worry about that. They have the maturity. I mean, I don't have to list the benefits of having someone who has life experience and just knowing how to deal with people, knowing how to, confidence. It's interesting. I think in personality types. So I have a free personality type quiz on my website at shainakeren.com. You can go and take it. You'll get a free summary of your personality. And the Myers-Briggs, I'm sure most people are familiar with it. It's based on that. And one of the most popular categories that people love to talk about and read about, and it's, you know, popular subject of many talks now. One of the biggest TED Talks, Susan Cain, is the power of introverts, right? So introversion versus extroversion. And what I think is hilarious is that people come to me often with this question. When I was younger, I was really extroverted, but now I think as that, you know, I got older, I'm more introverted, or the opposite, right? You know, I used to be much whatever. So what I usually tell them is that I don't think that it changed. I always say, well, back when you were 3, 4, 5, 10 years old, were you more this or more that, right? Like your natural, not 10, that's already like people are self-aware and start questioning themselves, but like when you were 4 years old, right? Were you the center of attention before you became inhibited or shy or, you know, anxious or whatever it is, right? You know, and then I think that, you know, then you go through the years of questioning yourself and self-doubt and the whole self-esteem challenge of being a teenager and a young adult. And then when you're older, you usually stop caring about what people think and get more comfortable with yourself and getting back to yourself. So I think your natural personality is really just a matter of getting back to what you were. Using myself again as an example, in high school, anyone who knew me would have thought that I was the most extroverted, you know, life of the party, outgoing, fun. And, you know, the older I get, the less interest or need I have for friends. And I prefer to have my 2 or 3 good friends and, you know, not like socialize a lot. And it's not like I changed at all. It's like when I think back, after socializing so much, I would come home and just need quiet and not realize why. I just think I'm so tired and right. Like, it's like, no, I actually needed that quiet, but it's really not cool to be quiet as a teen. So we do what we have to do to fit into certain parts of our life. So I think that also when you're a certain age, you get more comfortable with yourself. And that's very attractive. I think, you know, older people can have like this confidence in their abilities, in who they are, in what they can do. This is me, not in a like a stuck kind of a way, but in a like, this is what you get. I know what I'm capable of, and I have confidence about it.
But also show that you're a team player, because yes, someone who is 15 years younger than you, like literally 15 years younger than you, may feel if you come in like, I'm going to fix it, I'm going to be the one who shows you what to do. The vibe may not be right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Unless they're hiring a mentor, which is a whole
right. But if you're judgmental, that's the first thing that people are going to smell from a mile away. Right. And you absolutely know lots of things better than they do. And they know that. You don't have to show it. They will, you know, if you're humble enough and come in respecting what they've built and, you know, who they are and the position that they're offering you, they will end up coming to you for that advice.
I love the story of Chip Conley. He ran several boutique hotels, and then he decided that he wanted to kind of retire. Airbnb hired him. And Airbnb, I think he said that everyone was under 35, under 30, except one guy and he was in his upper 50s, I think it was. Mm-hmm. And they were trying to like figure out like what he could be doing there. They wanted them. They hired him to teach them about the hospitality industry, because they were a tech. They started off as a tech thing, and eventually they realized that he has so much to learn from them, and they have so much to learn from him, and they were all equal as learners and as teachers. And so I thought it was but he came in, not sure exactly what he was going to be doing there, but he was hired to be a teacher. But in the end, he learned so much more, and they became good friends because of the way he came in. Like in the first meeting, he's like, I don't know anything about tech, so you're going to have to teach me. I can teach you about hospitality. And I think that coming in with that vibe, he did really well for Airbnb, and he did really well for himself.
Beautiful.
So I think that vibe is really important. Like,
right. Like,
we're going to do this together. I have something to contribute, and I have a lot to learn. I mean, unless you really know about all the young tech and vibes and the whole thing, then. But we really, I think that for myself at least, and for my friends, we realize that there's so much to learn. The world is so interesting. There's no way that we can get to where we are today and know everything, because the world is changing so much. But even if the world didn't change so much, the more you know that you want to know more. Right. So come in with that vibe. Like, I have some ideas, and I would love to learn from you guys. And with you guys, I think it's the with, not only from, but with.
That's extremely attractive at an interview. 100%. I love that story.
Yeah. So he actually started a whole thing he calls it the modern elders. So that there's a whole thing that he started for midlifers of getting their next job or figuring out what they want to do next. So he has a lot. So he has a lot to say about that. I love his story.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to look that up. I love that. It sounds like a movement.
And that's exactly what he wants to do, is a movement.
Wow.
He works together with Arthur Brooks. Like, there's a lot of people who are like, so what do you want to do with the next half of your life?
Yes, yes, I love that.
And some of them really don't need to make the money. They have enough money they want to do and give back.
You're good.
But some people still want to make money, whether they need
I
it
mean,
or they don't. But
my mentor in career coaching, Nicholas Lohr, who founded the field in 1981 of career coaching, he came up with the term. It didn't exist before. There was only sports coaching before that. He's in his 80s and he's still working, and he specializes in people who are retirement, but they're not ready to retire and they're ready for a whole new career. And there's a whole group of people like that. It's incredible.
that's so cool. I think that we have so much to offer at our age and our stage, and so much to learn still. And I think that that combination really makes us really interesting employees or interesting business owners, because we have the time, in a way, we have time to learn and to meet with people. We have more confidence to have those meetings and be willing to learn, if we're willing to learn.
Yeah, and then to answer also, you asked before, like if about getting into a field that mostly hires younger people. So, one of the things I tell people is that, if you think it can't be done, I want you to think what you would say if you heard that someone with your background did it, right? And sometimes it takes us hearing someone else to do it, but sometimes we could harness the power of our imagination and imagine, like, oh my gosh, like, I think it's impossible, but if I would find out that someone else got into, digital marketing or something, social media management, and then I'd be like, oh, I could have done it, because like we let these like ideas stop us so many times. And I don't think there's an industry. There are industries that are more likely that a person who's older won't be interested in. But if you can combine your life experience with something that is more like technology, or what we think of as like the younger career focus, you'll have that intersection of those 2 points in a way that nobody else will have. And if you're confident about it and comfortable with it, you're the expert. Suddenly you can be the consultant, because you're combined 2 totally different, unrelated areas.
So just as an example, like ed tech, like there's the tech side of it, but there's also the ed side of it.
Right.
And people who have been in education can really do some fabulous things for any type of learner, not only children, but for older people as well. Everyone's learners. And so courses, so ed tech, if you're even slightly interested in tech, you can be on the ed side of the tech part. And so I think that there's so many opportunities. And in New York, there are so many meetups. There's so many things to talk about. It's like such an exciting time. And I think we just, like you said in the beginning, some people just need that confidence and that hand holding and their way of talking to their family and their spouse. I think that is something for a lot of people. And how am I going to tell them that I want to restructure their whole family life?
Right. Yeah. And my thought for that is like, don't make it like a big deal that I'm going to be doing this, because it's going to take some time. You're going to want to spend some time researching and learning, and then you're going to change your mind. And then, you'll take a class, and like, dip toes into pieces. And a good way to do that when you're looking into a new career is by taking online courses, using Coursera, LinkedIn Learning, Udemy. And for $9.99, you can take a class about just almost about anything. So before you decide that, I'm going to college and I'm doing something, take a course on it, see how you like it, get a little experience, speak to people in the field, make it clear that you're just looking around and, having conversations, and, until you're really ready and you've decided that you're comfortable with it, because you want to really make sure, no reason to stir the pot until you've made your decision. And also, it gets so easy to get dissuaded. It takes one comment from someone you love to really put, take you off track for a year or 5 years. So like, keep it to yourself until it's developed enough and you're sure about it, is my suggestion. Of course, do what works for your relationship, but in general, I would say, don't jump the gun too quickly. Take your time to research it and make your decision clearly, and, include family members along the way, as you feel makes sense.
I also feel like have the conversations with people who are enthusiastic about it. And I think that at our age, we may have a little bit more time, or maybe not, but find time to have conversations with people who are in that field. So that you see their enthusiasm and you see their encouragement. You can really have a good conversation, and then you can actually come into the conversation with your family members and with your friends with excitement, not just, should I do this? I don't know. So like, if you don't know, then it doesn't sound very appealing to other people. But if you come excited about it, then they're excited for
Right,
you.
right. When you tell your husband, you know, I just found like this thing that I'm so fascinated by and I'm learning about, and I just feel so much younger and energetic, and like that's really nice compared to you say like, I don't know, I'm so unhappy and I think maybe I should go to medical school and maybe that will be the answer. Like you're gonna get a different response, right?
So that's why I say, like, meet people that will give you that enthusiasm. Sometimes give
Right.
you the language, some give you some background, something. Because I feel like the internet is amazing. There's so much information, but it's more one way.
Mhm.
Like you're just absorbing. But when you talk to somebody, you can really get their energy.
Yeah. And if
And
you
their
have a
ideas.
therapist, it's a great thing to work through with a therapist and you know go through your feelings and how you, and there's a lot of pieces that when on the outside just looks like a, you know, a small change can mean a whole bunch of different things to people. So whether it's your therapist, your friend, your, you know,
A coach, and some of these things don't necessarily need the therapist who's going to go all the way back into your back history, but you can talk to a coach, you can
right,
talk to. I think that, you know, there's a place for a therapist. And
non-objective.
right, just somebody outside. It could be your mentor, it could be whatever. If you have a spiritual mentor, just somebody who knows you, but I also feel like if you're working with someone who doesn't yet know you, be very forthcoming. There's no point in saying only half the story.
Right, exactly. Yes, I have conversations like that all the time with people, and I've worked with enough people that I know to keep asking if something in the story isn't lining up or making sense. And I just spoke to someone who left the job, and it sounded like they just suddenly quit the job, and then after a couple more questions, it turned out that it was a family business, and there's a disagreement, and so that tells a whole different story about why they're looking for someone new versus just being a flighty person who wanted, you know. So for sure, like what you're saying, you share the whole story. If you're asking for advice, they can't, the whatever advice they give you is based on, you know, what you give.
Whatever you say, that's all they can work with.
Right.
And if they ask the question, then if a coach asks the question, or a therapist or a friend, just share it, unless you really, really, really don't want to. But then realize that the advice you're going to be getting or the insights that you'll be getting is as limited as you.
It's two-dimensional. Right. Exactly. Exactly. We have a couple of other questions. Let's see what else do we cover?
I do want to talk about. We were talking a lot about jobs, but I do want to talk about the idea of starting your own business, because then you own your time, which some people end up saying that you don't only work from 9 to 5, you work from 5 to 9. But you don't have to work all night. You don't have to, like, you can choose not to work.
Right. I mean, in my experience, that's the best way. You know, if no one's creating the career or offering the job you want, go create it for yourself, right? That's how lots of great businesses were born. And there is, I personally, I often think to myself when I'm working crazy hours, you know, I had something I had to prepare for last week and I was up, you know, 2 hours past when I should have been on the phone with somebody at a ridiculous time preparing for it, and then having an early morning meeting the next morning on someone else's time zone. And I said to my husband, I was like, you know, if I had an employer who was expecting this of me, I don't think I would do it. Like, I can't imagine any amount of money that would make me feel worth it. But like, I'm doing these things that seem extreme because like I'm invested and I care about it. And I would prefer to work, you know, ridiculous hours and extreme things that I would never want to do for someone else than be stuck in someone else's 9 to 5. I just, you know, I feel like that's like, you know, as a parents, like we just want to be able to have control over our lives. I had a grandmother who went through like a medical challenge, and I was able to just block off my calendar, hop on a plane and go there and not worry about anybody else. I mean, Pesach's coming. I decide how many days I want to work this month, take off the rest of them. And I mean, that's like, I can't imagine. There's so many days over the year when, you know, I'm on these WhatsApp chats, you know, where people are going crazy, you know, Pesach camps and pre-summer and post-summer and all the days that the kids are off and, you know, whatever stage people in life people are, but being able to, you know, have someone, you know, a daughter giving birth and not being able to be there because you have to ask your employer permission. If you want to have your own business and you have something that you want to do, and it's just a matter of confidence and, you know, everything else works, I would not let that stop me. I think most people would rather work harder, but then know that they have all the potential and they have the flexibility and that they own their time. And to me, there's nothing better.
Right. And so actually after Pesach, I have a few interviews with people who are helping people, especially in building their businesses. So I'm really excited about that too, because I feel like for some people, a flexible job is really all what they want. They want the paycheck, they want to know, and if it's flexible, then that works. Some people want to build a business and have they're owning their own flexibility and bigger potential.
I think
it's just different personalities.
Absolutely. There's personality. And then I think the biggest thing when someone tells me they want to own a business, it's very practical. Could you afford to? Do you need the paycheck, right? Or can you afford to not make money for a year or two? Unless you want to get an investor and go that route. So there's like a lot of practical considerations. And then, people are having this conversation, but about, a really good way to start a business is if you keep your job. And I've helped a lot of people navigate that, whether it's 6 months to a year of keeping your job and starting something on the side is a really safe way to do it. I started my own business that way. I was running a daycare, in the education field, and I, got certified and trained, and I spent my nights and weekends career coaching until I was able to match my income and I was able to afford to quit. It's a luxury to be able to start a business, and but there
are a lot of considerations which we'll have to be talking about with somebody else, because I think that the idea of it's not only we're looking for a job, it could be a business, it could be a consultant business. And there's so many different ways to take what and let's talk about that. That was one of the other questions that came in. I don't know which question.
I think it says here about, meaning people teaching about what they do or becoming a consultant.
Right.
Okay. So I see that this question is also asking about, I see someone asked, they said that some people can teach what they've been doing, but my work doesn't have anything I can teach, so this isn't an option. So I saw that question come in.
Let's go back a second. When we're talking about someone that could teach, it's either a course or a consultant or a coach or something like that. Not just like just stand up and teach, where you're going to find the clients. So I just want to just go back. Okay, now.
Got it. Meaning, wait, so do you want to address that of where?
No, because some people, when you say, well, what can I teach? Because one of the things that we talk about when is like teach what you know. But I think she's saying that she doesn't have anything that's teachable. So
I would question that. I've yet to meet a person who doesn't have something that they're an expert at. And the biggest reason for people not recognizing it is simply that whatever comes naturally to you, we all assume comes naturally to everybody else, right? I mean, and sometimes when people ask us questions, it's just like, what? I need help with this, or you're such a great shopper. Can you help me this? Or I need help, planning my menu or organizing my closets or planning this trip. And the thing that we naturally do, we just zoom right into it. We think it's so easy. And then when someone says wow, you could really charge for that. It's such an amazing service. We usually brush it off, or we're like, oh, don't be silly. Anybody can do that. But I do aptitude testing with people, and we can see in black and white compared to the general population. There's percentile scoring, different diagnostic, analytical, actual cognitive scores where you can see what you are compared to other people, and then it becomes impossible to argue. And it's no, you're more this than most people. So when you're looking at this kind of project, it's going to come so easy to you. And then I would see that dawning in there. Oh, really? I know that people are always asking me that, but it's so weird to me because it's so simple. So it's easy to ignore the things that you're naturally good at. And I don't think there's anyone who has gone through 40 years on this planet and doesn't have something that you can teach to other people.
Right. Like you just said, so many ideas, the organizer, the one who's very organized, could actually help other people become organized.
Yeah.
It's a good business.
Absolutely.
And it's flexible. You don't have to take a client Erev Pesach. I'm sure somebody would love to.
That people can teach. There's teaching people how to run a kitchen, how to manage their life, being an ADD coach. I mean, any life struggle, you see so many life coaches do this, any life struggle that you've had and figured out, you can show other people. Not every one of those things has to turn into a business. But if you're looking for a business idea, there's certainly something, that your friends turn to you or people always come to you for. That could be, maybe you need to get some training or certification, maybe you're the therapist, but you can turn that into an expertise. And people just overlook their own talents and experiences so easily.
So I'm hearing is don't only look at the job that you've been doing for all these years, look at your whole life.
Right. and sometimes like we could combine that in interesting ways. You know, you were the teacher, or you were the secretary, the executive assistant, or whatever. So you don't realize like you have these tech skills, you know, that you use at your job, and then like you know so much about whatever industry. And often, you know, people who start organizations, we see it happen because of a life circumstance. You know, maybe they lost a child, maybe they went through infertility, maybe they you know had a family member with mental illness, and then like suddenly you become an expert on something. And then lots of people we see start businesses or organizations because of that. It doesn't have to be one of those very dramatic things, but it can be anything. And you know, you've learned about health because of a child of yours who went through something. And then I think that people like well, you know, or you're the person in the neighborhood who found everyone their house without being a real estate agent, you know, and then you just like think, oh, it's just like something that I like to do. But no, like, yeah, your job, just because of what you did in the past, it's important to me to look at who you are as a person. And if we get stuck in only looking at what we did in the past, well, then you'll never do anything new.
Right. And think about, like you said, what do people come to you, but also what do people compliment you? Like, just like, I think that sometimes it's the question that we should be asking ourselves, like, or people should be helping us ask, or asking us so we can think about, like, but like, I like to say, what do people compliment you about?
Yes, that's such a
You
good
know,
question.
and this is, I think it's a flip of like, what do people come to you for? Hopefully they thank you at the end. So what do people thank you for? What do they compliment you about? And maybe there's a combination of two things, and just an interesting way of combining those two things. But sometimes it's almost always it helps to talk it over with somebody, like not just to think that you have to come up with the idea yourself.
Yeah, I mean, you know, problems that you come up with in your head are very hard to solve in that same head of yours. So for sure, I mean, people who, you know, you love your baking and you turn that into a business, or I have a friend who's so good at gifting, and you know, she uses that in her business, but the corporate gifting is a great business. And there are people who turned, I was just listening to a great episode on Lilac and Cream, and how that you know, couple turned that into a business. And like so many things that, you know, you could just easily say like, oh, that's just something I do for fun. But if you really like doing it, there's so many businesses that you can start without professional training, just because it's something that you can do. And then you need to go learn those business skills. And I'm excited for those upcoming podcasts that you have on people who can teach people about how to start businesses.
Right. So I'm really excited about those are after Pesach. So this was such an interesting conversation. I'm so glad that we had this conversation. How could people reach you? What's your website?
Thank you. It's just ShainaKeren.com, ShainaKeren.com, and they can book a free discovery call there. They can get some free resources, discover their personality type, and reach out if there's anything I can do, or if there's anyone I can introduce you to. And I guess my message is really like, don't limit yourself to what you've done in the past. You have like so many options and so many years ahead of you, and you know, you haven't finished living yet.
Right. Thank you. And for those of you who are just watching for the first time, you can join us at Jewish Women Talk About Midlife. We have a Facebook group, we have the podcast, and we're setting up a few other projects. So follow us, and you'll find out what we're doing for this important stage of midlife, because we have many more years to go, and we can really enjoy these years. So thank you, Shaina, and thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Devora. Pleasure to be here. Have a good night.
Thank you for joining me in another fascinating conversation about midlife. If you'd like to reach me, Devora Krasnianski, to talk about your midlife or anything else, you can reach me at jewishmidlife@gmail.com, and follow us at Jewish Midlife on Instagram and Facebook, and join us in our conversations on our Facebook group at facebook.com/group/Jewish Women Talk About Midlife.